Okay. So, all right. So everyone on the mega project and working on your experiments and science, I want to bring to attention something very important, and that's the temporary shadow or cloud or fog that can get you in a daze when you are using these predetermined models in your engineering tools or software. Okay, I know some of you like to use software, and that's okay. However, there is the very real intuitive and what you observe information that you get, the data that you get from the experiments you carry. And then there is the math or the language used, well, the math and the language used from someone else's observations to create formulas, to create or use numbers, and create um, predictions based on what they observed. Okay. Now, obviously, something very important here. Okay. Um, let's talk about essentially what you observe naturally, ladies and gentlemen, and your interpretations is very important. Okay, because that's what happened in the past, anyways, with people running these experiments and then creating their own formulas and predictions. But see, formulas are formulas based on something that was observed. Okay, and then there are theories. Okay, now these formulas and theories get put into things like physics and other areas of science, but one thing that they sometimes can do is they can shroud what you are observing yourself, okay, and how you are understanding in relation to what's already been observed. Okay. So in other words, the things you understand and other people have come to understand, they all have a unique method of observation, but they are also very similar in the very mere sense that someone is literally observing something. So there is obviously a co-creation for the spiritual south. There's obviously a co-creation happening there because we know from the double split that something you observe starts to act differently in its own way. Okay, so let's go, and I want to basically say we could call this the translation gap. All right, between direct natural observations and predefined abstracted models built on someone else's lens. Okay. And so for many people using software, these simulations are often just codified echoes of how others saw and interpreted the thing. Okay. And sometimes that echo can distort or obscure what you may be trying to feel, test, or even reveal in your own way, or even distort what you have observed and how you have understood it. Okay. It's fundamental, it's very alive. Okay. So don't let anyone cloud your intelligence. All right. So softwares are basically like saying, hey, look, here's a version we've posted into code based on equations from 1932 processed in matrix form and broken into mesh elements, for example. Okay. It can cloud the clarity of your own, shroud the clarity of your own insight. All right. So here's a better workflow I recommend for many of you. Okay, start with your pure observation, sketch it, describe the feeling, sense the flow. That's all very important because, as I said before, what is observed or what people have created through these devices, such as circuits, computers, and how they work and the energies that are at play, well, those things are very, very real within the person who's okay. To ignore it is honestly, really, to ignore it is really, you're not playing on a God level. Let me just put it that way. But you really aren't playing on a God level. Okay? You have to realize that things people have created and are operating and using energies that we already have, okay? That we have to tap in on how to amplify. So, for example, like I've said in previous videos, instead of an op amp amplifying and a circuit where that's receiving electricity from some kind of generator, how about op amp the human biofield, all right, by just having something that is super sensitive to their own I mean, copper is already sensitive, duh. So y'all get the point, okay? So, anyways, the point of this, okay, is this is why I call it formulaic gatekeeping, all right? Is because when you understand these concepts, all right, that you are observing in your uniqueness, along with what you are studying as well, you'll be able to find the difference in language between someone who's actually exploring and someone who's actually just regurgitating. Because someone who's exploring describes things a certain way, okay? A certain way that everyone essentially can understand, and any layman person can understand as well, okay? That's genius. Okay, that's genius. Our genius is taking something complicated and explaining it in simplistic ways that anyone can understand. But when people start going back into like just purely regurgitating or speaking math and formulas, then and theories based on other hypotheses or based on other experiments, then they're not really tapping into intelligence per se. They're just tapping into, they're just regurgitating something that was said. They're not actually actively, most likely, involved in experimenting and observing and playing around, okay, with these forces and energies. So you can say it's like a filter. What they have is like filters. But here it's no filter. We are observing and we are observing everything from our observation. We have raw, intuitive, like if you're observing the forces of spinning disk and playing around with those gyroscopic forces to see what effects you can have. Okay, that's your raw, intuitive observation. On the contrast, software is cold, cluttered software interface and formula overlays. See, on this chat GPT, it has put what I put and described it as when observation becomes a question. When observation becomes formula and formula becomes interface, what's lost? So yeah, don't let your observations just only become formula and formula become interface, because your observation has many effects going on. So a formula can only do you so much. All right, you have to be open. Right, especially if you're trying to build something new, you can't just rely on formula. You have to experiment and observe and be a dunce. I think if we just educate stuff like just dunces, I have no time for it because it's like a cloud. It's like, yo, 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 no, no, no. I've done my experiments. I'm going to be distracted. All right. So, anyways, that's what I have for y'all, ladies and gentlemen. So, continue to do your research in development. Right now, in the mega project, we are in a lot of research and development phase, but we are also in need of the funding for prototyping these things. Okay. Now, there are lots of tools. There's 3D printers. Okay, and definitely need the funding for that. If you are doing something yourself already and you don't need the funding, then please go ahead, reach out and send an email message as far as how far you are in and what you have come to uncover and where you would like to go as far as prototyping. Okay. Namaste, ladies and gentlemen, and that is all I have for y'all. Let's